My camera is not coming on, so I'm trying to work it out. But I will call the meeting to order at 8:34 a.m. I do have a wedding this afternoon, very early afternoon, which precluded me from getting home from this meeting. So I am posted and I'm calling in. But I am going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Martell, the ultra capable Pat Martell, to facilitate the meeting today. And I appreciate all you board members in attendance. So Vice Chair Martell, thank you.
You're very welcome. And with that, I will call the meeting to order. Roll call.
All right. Secretary Halverson?
Here.
Thank you. Member Holmes is absent. Let me just double check the meetings. Yeah. Member Holmes is absent. Chairman Lewis?
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Martell?
Present.
Thank you. Member Siegel?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Member Sutherland?
Here.
All right. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Shall we stand for the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So this is a time for public comment if there's anyone here, but there's no one here, so.
I think we have agenda.
Do we
have approval of the agenda?
Oh, excuse me. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Are there any additions to the agenda as previously presented?
Yes, Vice Chair Martell, there is 6.11 on the consent agenda. We're rolling over some of these to the meeting on the 20th, so there are no policies to approve on 6.11 on the consent agenda.
Okay, so to June 20th. Okay.
Remove item
6.11.
6.11, if you can remove that. Are there any other changes? With that, can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for that revision, Jana.
Mhm.
Now we're on to public comment. Then this is the time that we reserve for citizens, employees, and representatives of school groups to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. By law, the board can't take action on any item or discuss items that are not on the approved agenda, but we always welcome your comments. Persons addressing the board are asked to state their names and whether or not they're a resident of the district. And I reserve the right at this point to limit comments from the public as well as the amount of time spent on any topic. Is there anyone present who would like to make a comment to the board? Hearing none, we will move on to the first item, 3.1. Am I looking at the right agenda here?
Yeah, Dr. Cornelius.
Or Celia.
Dr. Corey Loomis.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Corey.
Dr. Lewis, would you like to share your own screen or would you like me to share the presentation for you?
It might be easier if you do it on your end. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for being here on a Saturday, Dr. Loomis.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. I know one of these days I'll be there in person.
Good. We would
to
love
go to those, next year. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for just giving me some time of your busy agenda just to share some, I don't know if I want to call it professional development, but more reminders. I believe, me coming and visiting and sharing as I have been with all of our charter schools for the last 4 years is important. I do it to build you up and encourage you to also, maintain and kind of improve our relationship as well. because relationships are important in our work. So again, thank you so much. So I've been on a journey for the last 4 years. I just had a charter governing boards on my heart. And so I'm leaning into that, and I'm expanding that, and I'll share a little bit more in the presentation of where we're going to further support charter boards. So I really appreciate all the work that you do, and the team down in Riverside is awesome. Craig and Brandon, you're great, and Liz and Jana, your whole team's just awesome. It's great to work with. So let me really jump into it. Our overlapping why collectively, of course, is students. So I think when authorizers and charter boards and charter leaders, when we coalesce and really focus on that, I think some of the other decisions and things that can get in the way, those go by the wayside. So we really focus on that and lean into the complexity and the challenges and the dynamics of the authorizer and charter relationship. Next slide. So I've shared the last couple of years some resources, and I always look for what I call plug and play resources that are easy to implement from the board's perspective. So just a couple reminders for the first part of the slide deck of what's the board's role and responsibility. Of course, is to make the best decisions possible for kids, be excellent stewards of the resources provided to you. And the challenge, I think, with all charter schools, and Eric Premick, I think he has a saying essentially that if one charter school sneezes, the rest of the charter schools in the state catch a cold. So I think to keep in mind regarding decisions are also made on kind of behalf of the movement and doing the best that you can, not only just for yourself, but the charter school movement as a whole. Because we know, obviously, we're clearly aware that there tends to be an overreaction legislatively when we have a couple bad actors making bad decisions. So next slide. This is important. And again, so some of the other duties and responsibilities to essentially select and support, your leadership and making sure they're on track with your goals, partnering with your school leadership, of course. And, a big piece is also obviously making sure that you're operating and financially viable. So we know with statistics nationally with charter schools, the number one reason for charter failure tends to be around for fiscal reasons. And it's not necessarily for all those bad reasons we read in the newspaper. Sometimes it's just mismanagement or just not appropriately, administering and executing their budget. Next slide. Actually, I have a couple of these slides in here. I've got kind of the bell curve with all of our portfolio. We're up to 15 schools now, which is over 12,000 students. So we've got a couple governing boards that are on the earlier end. I had a couple of slides just as reminders for some that are just kind of gaining traction and gaining experience. But this is just a reminder of what this is all about. Of course, it's always been about parent choice, but also innovation, providing opportunities for low socioeconomic students. And, the idea of, it's interesting when we talk about the tension, and if we just look at number 7, that's baked in the DNA of the Charter Schools Act, vigorous competition. So, some of the challenges we have are almost innate and inherent with the Charter Schools Act. Next slide. This diagram here just talks about essentially, as you know, and I've shared in the past, the board's ultimately responsible for everything that happens within the school, whether it's the school leadership, finances, operations, safety. There's that trade-off we call the mega waiver that a lot of charter school leaders, and Jane probably would agree, is not so mega nowadays. Essentially, that idea that charter schools were going to be waived from all these legislations and rules so they could operate more freely, but that trade-off is more autonomy for accountability. But I know over the years, I always have I've shared a picture of kind of books, a large stack of books on one side and a small stack of books, but I think those rules keep increasing over the years for charter school leaders.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Really, so what it just is mainly a reminder about the board's responsible for all of it. Do we have kind of our eyes and awareness around this whole organization, this whole entity, including all of your sites? So, the question always comes back to how do we minimize and litigate any potential risk and exposure? So this is just a little reminder of that and a tool that I've shared in the past, but I just wanted to bring back to the forefront. Next slide. So some research that I've shared in the past, and I'll share a little bit more today, is done by the National Charter School Institute, the National Charter School Resource Center. And that particular group is an entity of the Department of Education. So they have a lot of great resources for charter schools, but they also have a lot of dedicated resources for charter boards. And so this research was done probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I interact with the researchers, and we're doing some things in our county as well that I'll invite you to participate in. But essentially, they asked the question: why are charter schools failing? What are the key indicators? What are the key areas? And so they interviewed and researched with authorizers and charter schools, and they identified several areas that when they're falling short in these particular areas, this could exasperate and lead to a kind of a downward spin. And so, next slide. And that's what this looks like here. So these are the areas of kind of the failure or weakness at the leadership level, the board, operations, finance, talent. When we're talking about talent, essentially we're talking about staffing. So, that's always a challenge, I think, for most LEAs, most charters, as far as teachers, right? We have a teacher shortage. And so what does that look like? Next slide. So this particular toolkit is facing towards the board. Essentially, it's a toolkit for the board itself. And this is a simple rubric. I try to, again, look for easy to use tools and resources. You don't need a PhD type of work, and it doesn't take too long. So essentially, these are the categories. And it's a self kind of reflective piece in any of these particular categories. So I've been encouraging charter boards, it might be hard to do all of it, might take some time, but are there any questions that you have, or are there any consistent gaps or questions around a particular area, and maybe do a deeper dive on that. So I did put an invite out, and I have 2 schools that I'm actually going to be working through this toolkit with them. And just to help them identify potentially any gaps that they may have, and that they may want to develop a professional plan or a plan of improvement around a particular gap. And I'm actually partnering with the researchers. So we're kind of in the beginning stages of what that will look like. But the researchers are from WestEd, a very renowned, respected national organization that does research in a lot of different areas. So the researchers actually are excited about this work that we're leaning into, and are willing to participate to whatever degree we'd like them to participate in. And so they're going to be partnering with us as I partner with those 2 schools to just do a self-evaluation within their organization. Next slide. This is just a simple dashboard. There's lots of different ways to track it. So the idea is, okay, we have questions, we have some gaps, we have some concerns. What can we do to mitigate, to minimize those? How are we tracking that? How are we tracking the progress in those particular areas? So this is just an idea of that. So you, board, already get some great data from your team regarding finances, regarding, academic scores and performance. So you already get some regular pieces of information which are important. And again, just thinking around, are there pieces that we are still grappling with, still want to move forward with, and we need a little extra emphasis on that. Next slide. So that was kind of the core of what I want to just share with the board. So we're kind of on a downhill piece of the presentation. So a couple of reminders. We've got renewal coming up. So it's just amazing that this is, this upcoming year, we'll begin our first renewal. So I think there'll be a lot of, there's going to be some state conversation and reaction as it's been years, 4 or 5 years since we've had renewals with the built-in pauses that the legislature, through the pandemic. So I think there'll be a lot of conversation around what does this look like. We're going to be having it with some of your authorizers. We got an authorizer conference coming up this week, and there'll be a heavy conversation around that. So the rules have changed. The game has changed when it comes to renewal, especially for those who have been part of the charter school movement for some time. In the past, we used to do kind of a comparative analysis. The phrase was essentially that these students were attending the neighborhood school. We would do that comparison of that school to the charter school. So that we no longer have that comparison. And so now what happens is that the state actually creates an annual list for all the charter schools, whether it's their renewal year or not. Their first one was published, I believe, in March. So essentially, they're going to place all the schools in one of 3 tiers. And you're probably familiar with this. I won't spend too much time on it, but essentially, high tier, middle tier, low tier. The idea with a high tier is that they've got blue and green. They're outperforming all the categories, comparison categories to the state. And essentially, they'll have an easier pathway to renewal. The presumption is an automatic renewal. The idea is they'll have to do, minimal work in that renewal, and they could get approved for up to 7 years. And then kind of the reverse of that would be the low tier. And the presumption going into that is essentially that school will not be renewed. And those are schools that are performing below the state comparison in all their categories, and also have red and orange on the dashboard. So those are the 2 indicators they look at, essentially a state comparison and then also the dashboard. So the presumption is non-renewal, but they do give an out if they have a plan and it appears the plan might be working, but they only get a 2-year approval. So as a typical bell curve, we're estimating probably 70 to 80% of charter schools in the state, and even higher in our portfolio. We don't have any schools that are below that would fall into that middle tier this year. So with that middle bubble, it's essentially kind of a mixture of colors and mix of results when it comes to the state comparison, when it comes to the dashboard. So the idea there is essentially that the school demonstrates that every year that the students were in the charter school, that they grew by an academic year. So it's a little vague for interpretation, but the premise going into that middle tier is that it will be a renewal. So that's the idea, but there is some determination and work that needs to be done to demonstrate the growth of those students. So that's where authorizers are asking a lot of questions. Well, what will that look like for you and you? Because the state doesn't say what does that look like. It does talk about school-wide data. It definitely does talk about school-wide data. So we're trying to determine, finalize what that looks like so we could provide some guidance to the rest of our schools. We do have, we only have 1 school that's coming up, so that would be kind of our benchmark. In the next month or so, we're going to kind of work out the game plan with that school, and then we'll be using that system and that structure for the other 8 schools the following year, which would also include Pivot Riverside. Then, as the board's aware, we got the deadline coming up for the LCAP plan.
And Dr. Levis, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you guys discussing that at your meeting this week, at your conference this week of authorizers?
We are. There's a lot of sessions around that. I'm always feel good and comfortable of where we're at. Of course,
Sure.
There's a spectrum of authorizers that like to do a little bit more. We tend to we're definitely sensitive to charter schools, and I'm kind of a statute ed code purist, so I don't like to read and interpret more than what's stated in statute. So for us, it'll definitely be fair and balanced. But yeah, well, there'll be a conversation, and I think that will be good too with authorizers to have some alignment around that.
Exactly, yeah. That's my
Right,
point.
and
And
that's
they
where
turn to you all, they turn to you all quite a bit as the model.
they do, and I appreciate that, and that's why it's important for us to be in those spaces so we could keep it balanced. I could frame it that way. Keep it balanced for charter schools without asking more than that's necessary and doing more work that's necessary. So, but again,
We appreciate that, Dr. Loomis.
absolutely, yeah, I definitely advocate and support charter schools, and I've said this many times, but charter schools are an important part of our educational ecosystem and really important to our democracy as a whole. So we need strong, healthy charter schools, and authorizers need to be sensitive to remove as many barriers and challenges to let schools kind of do what they do best. So thank you. Yep, and then we got the LCAP plan coming up. Next slide. Excited this year. We didn't have too many schools in our portfolio, but there's new requirement on how we review teacher credentialing, and there's a federal kind of analysis, and then there's a state analysis. But all that to say is that Pivot Riverside's no teachers were identified for misassignments, which essentially is the federal guidelines. That's a great thing. So no issues, no concerns over there. And also, Pivot Riverside, I appreciate, is participating in a data pilot program. So as you know, we have a couple different initiatives, and we lean into this work around collaboration and support of charters. And we're actually kind of continuing to push and share that message even at this state conference coming up, that we as authorizers have to do this work differently. So we feel there's better results, not only compliance, which most authorizers kind of focus in on, but we also feel that it's just better for relationships when we partner with schools. So this is one where we're actually using outside resources, and we have all of our what I call initiatives. They're all voluntary, so schools could participate or not, and they're not mandated. There's no pressure from the authorizer, but we use outside resources and expertise to build up capacity around data. So that's what we're working on with, and Pivot Riverside is a part of that program, which we're excited about. And really, we have a bigger message on our end. We're actually doing analysis and collecting data around this approach, what we're calling responsive authorizing. And we have some preliminary data with positive results, essentially sharing the message to authorizers that this is a better way to go, and we're getting better results and outcomes, and schools are building their capacity and their expertise to do better for kids and families. So next slide. One that I'm excited about, again, as I shared in the beginning of the meeting, I appreciate the time you've given me here. So I'm expanding this idea of supporting charter boards. So we're in the preliminary stages of developing a charter board network. I had a couple meetings just kind of to organize at the end of the school year, and I know it's busy for everybody. So we've had kind of a sample of schools. They gave me some feedback. So what's been expressed to me is that there's a need and a desire to essentially build a community of charter board members where they could learn and grow together. There's some great organizations out there, but what I don't see is essentially kind of an ongoing network. CSCC does a great job. I know they have kind of their module for governing boards, self-paced. CCSA does a great job, but it seems like there's limited opportunities for ongoing growth and development. So that's what we want to develop. And I've shared with all of our boards and our charter school leaders, essentially, I'm not aware of any such kind of network in the state. So I'm open for any boards outside of our county to participate. So what will that look like? Essentially, what we're looking at is our quarterly meetings next year, and I'm in the process of identifying those. And it's a blend of hybrid and also in person. Essentially, they're open to having 2 in-person meetings and then 2 virtual meetings. But it'll all go around some categories they were interested in gaining some professional development. I think I might have those on the next slide.
Yeah.
So I just presented a survey to the group. I was able to get 10 responses. So the other piece, this slide is asking about a summer workshop. So I essentially, in finalizing a summer workshop, and I could share with you now, we're looking at July 18th from 9 to 1 p.m. And I know you're Northerners, but this will be in person in Riverside. And I'm partnering with YMC. Jerry Sims is going to help me. And then Jana, your group there at Charter Safe. So I've got a group with Daniel Rodriguez and some others that we're going to be providing some training and professional development just for charter boards. So Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to kind of blast out the flyer where people could actually start registering for it. It'll be free. I have room for about 50 or 60. I would be super excited. Jerry was asking me, how many do you think? I'm like, oh, maybe 30. But then when I was talking to the whole Springs Nation there, Natalie's like, are you sure you're willing to open up to other charters? Because just within her network, they get so many boards. So I'm like, sure. So yeah, it would be awesome if we could have had 50 or 60 charter board members that are all there kind of starting our community. So it'll be a half day training. All the food will be free. The training's free. And YMC and Charter Safe will be helping me with that. Next slide.
It's our love language. Food's our love language.
Yes. So these were the general categories, not only with what I'm calling a summer workshop, but also ideas and topics that we're gonna tackle next year. So these were just areas that the folks who responded to the survey identified. Essentially, continued board development, board duties and responsibilities, further training and understanding around what that looks like. Ideas around how do we continue to support our school leadership. And so with the network, my goal, we have a few different networks. We have what I call our portfolio network. That's just kind of family business. So that's our portfolio. We meet and we talk about, our portfolio and what's going on, if there's any changes to our oversight. But I also like to hear back from schools. How can we improve? What do we need to look at minimizing, cutting out? But then besides that, I have a charter school network. So with our networks, I always try to find, charter leaders that speak to charter leaders. And so for me, it's just an honor and a privilege to create the space to kind of be the platform, which is easier to do at the county level. But I really try to bring people that are in the field to talk and provide guidance. And so that's what I'll be looking to do as well, finding outside partners with the Charter Board Network and maybe tapping on a couple of you, maybe you, Mr. Lewis, and just kind of share your perspective, with all your experience over the years. Again, because we do have that bell curve. So we do have, a chunk of newer schools and that are still building up their knowledge and expertise. Next slide. All right, I'll go through these last couple slides quickly. Okay, next slide. I'm behind on my e-letter, but I'm, would no problem on sending out my, it used to be a monthly, but now it's kind of a bi-monthly e-letter. Essentially, I try to put all the resources that RCWE has in one location and kind of give schools a heads up and what's coming down the pipe and as far as dates and information comes. Next slide.
Wait. There was some handsome gentleman in the middle there. Just want to point out.
Yes, how about that? Little love for Riverside Pivot.
Yeah,
Pivot
thank
Riverside.
you.
Absolutely. I shared CSDC before, so I'm pretty sure you probably have a membership, but just wanted to kind of point that they do have some governance support. Is more of the kind of the module-based, self-paced program. Next slide. Then this is the resource that I was sharing before, the National Charter School Resource Center. They have a whole page dedicated just to charter governing boards, different topics, different videos that you could look at. Next slide. Board on Track. So they do have some paid services, but they have a great free open resource library for charter boards. So a lot of great resources there at that location. All right, and we could go to the last slide. I appreciate so much everything that you do for your kids and families, you know, up and down the state, and your work is important. And I appreciate our partnership. And you can always let me know if there's anything that, you know, in particular that you need support on, and I will definitely try my best to put something together for you. But yeah, you're invited to participate in the workshop and the network as well. But again, I thank you for your time and thank you for your dedication.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Dr. Loomis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Loomis. That was a really great overview. I couldn't agree more that board governance is such an important issue. And doing the best job that we can as board members is what we're all committed to doing. So we really appreciate your support, your collaboration, and the partnership that we feel that we have with you. So thank you so much for that.
I'd like to add that you do these regular reviews you have with us are very useful to us. They're very practical, and they remind us, I think even for corporations, to back up and what are they trying to do, and don't get down in the weeds too much, but to back up and look at what's the ultimate responsibility and then review what that is on a routine basis, regular basis. So your reminder would be maybe useful for families too, I might add, to look at some of the basic concepts we're working on and dealing with, and what are resources that can help us do better at them. So these, you do an absolutely wonderful job of making presentations. I could never, I thought I was good at it, but I feel bad now listening to you. So anyway, I appreciate, I've been hearing several of your presentations over the years. You do an excellent job, and we learn a lot from it. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I get a lot of practice. So I did have to reschedule this one a couple times, so that this is my 14th one for the season. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll continue to push forward to Jane and the team any additional resources on that topic as well, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Loomis. You know, I think from our get-go of our relationship with you a decade ago or more, you've always been a great partner. And I think while we appreciate all of our authorizers, your Office of Education has been just a tremendous asset to us. And I wish there was many of you in the state. You really see us as the partners we are as we work to educate these kids and support these families. And it's not just a great presentation, but a great relationship. And as you'll see in a moment, we're so proud of our Riverside site. It's growing. It's a great physical site. It's a great team. There's just amazing students. And so we're proud to be part of that community. And I'll certainly see if I can get down to your workshop. Thank you so much. And thank you, board members, for your comments. Tom, you're an okay presenter. I did cast a vote for us on the interest of those 10 responses. And I did not rate board evaluation very high because I already know we have the best board around. So I appreciate all of you.
And Dr. Loomis, Jamie Aspasia Sachs came to our graduation and handed out diplomas, and board member Siegel and board member Halverson got to meet her, and it was a surprise visit, which we love, which is why we invite everybody. And it was wonderful to have her at our graduation ceremony. So I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't know, that she was at our graduation.
Awesome. Yep, she's a great supporter. I was actually at an event with her last night, so that's great.
Yeah, she's a very, very cool lady.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Loomis,
very
for
much.
everything. Appreciate your time, especially on a Saturday morning.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry.
Okay. You want some water?
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. So moving on, speaking of Riverside, we're going to have an update from from Craig on, oh, excuse me, on, pardon me, On Riverside, on the Riverside team, excuse me.
And I think Brandon is gonna share his screen, so I'm gonna put it up here so you all can see it.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hi,
Good morning, Brent.
Thanks again, Dr. Loomis. Always cool to hear from you. Always good when you visit. It was cool running into you at CSDC today or this year. And I just want to say I've been with Pivot Riverside long enough to have a very deep appreciation for being partnered with an authorizer that supports us and encourages what we're trying to do. So I know everybody just thanks you a lot. It needs to be done again because I've been through different experiences, and you're definitely a breath of fresh air, and welcome every time you want to come see us. So jumping over to Riverside, here we are. The flags are out, the signs are up, the flowers are blooming. Riverside is beautiful. I'm not going to hit you too long with data. That's somebody else's job to bore you to death with data and all that. But I think it was worth mentioning a second time that Riverside this year, we started, we stayed, and we ended above our target enrollment. And I just think that was a pretty cool thing. So I just wanted to say it one more time before you get all the deep data.
We're on our way to 200, Brandon.
Yes, we are. State testing, always a big deal. Truth is, I wish it wasn't, but it is. So we're leaning into it. Our Tom's dashboard says 100% this year. We did have one opt out that we know on our actual dashboard will count against our denominator. So the asterisk says it was 99%, not 100% this year, even though we hit 100 last year. I really wanted to repeat, but that's hard to do. I did want to call attention to our alternative assessment. That takes a lot of legwork on our education specialist team. 100% participation. It's intensive one-on-one testing, and they actually absolutely crushed it for those more disadvantaged students. We had 9 additional students that were not taking the alternative assessment, but took the standard state testing, but still required one-on-one in one way or another, either scribe or read aloud or some other assistance. So our education specialist team, I mean, they were working round the clock like happy hour at Dave & Buster's. They were just working their butts off. Alternative LPAC is not a very common thing, but I really wanted to hit a very individual story. We had one particular student who was classified due to a technical error. We even found the paperwork where mom checked a box and then crossed it out and said no. And the district that he started at in 3rd grade would not undo it. They went through and went through and went through it. And finally the parents said, hey, we're not doing the test anymore. His academic level was at such a level that he could not access the content of the LPAC. His grasp on English is fine, but he can never pass the LPAC because of his other abilities. And the EC and the ES this year, they worked their butts off. They got trained to do an actual alternative LPAC. And our EC, Gus Munoz, had a relationship with the family who for years said, we're not doing it. We're not putting him through it. It's too much stress. He has no chance to get it the way it's set up. And we reached out to the family and said, hey, we got him switched over. We got this whole thing set up. We promise this is the last time we're going to bug you about it. And we got him the alternative LPAC, and he finally tested out of a designation that he should have never been in the first place. And we finally got it done for him. That was such a huge win for that family and a huge win for that relationship. And it was one kid, but man, it was a big deal to us. It was a big deal to that family to not be harassed every year for a test that he shouldn't have been harassed for in the first place.
Way to go.
Thanks for getting them through, Brandon.
Future goals. So we know college career indicator is a big part of the dashboard. Just getting kids to at least dip their toe in college before they're done with us was a big deal. And Luis Portilla, our college and career counselor, really, really set up a huge part. He's been making connections over his last few years. But our future goal, we're starting to realize, getting them in is one thing, but these are still pivot students. They still need support. You can't just say, hey, you're signed up for college, go for it. So our future goal is to really bring the ECs into that component of it and figure out a way to support these students as if these college classes are still pivot classes. Because these, we say independent studies does not necessarily mean independent student. They still need that support. And so our future goal is to get the ECs to take over from what Luis has set up. So Luis is, he set them up, but now it's on the ECs to knock them down. We really got to step up our game and support to make sure that once they're in these college classes, they're actually going to succeed and thrive, and not at the expense of their standards pivot classes. So that's our goal going forward, is more of a comprehensive team effort for concurrent enrollment and that CCI indicator.
Awesome.
Moving over to our elementary program, field trips. They do them often, especially elementary. Santana Regional Park, it's a staple in their bag of tools. They go there, I think, once a month, once every other month. It's close by. The kids love it. It's an easy win. One of the bigger ones this year, Yanks Air Museum. I don't know where you all grew up or how you grew up, but I distinctly remember I grew up close to El Toro Marine Base, and we would get up on our roof, and man, when the Blue Angels came over, that was it. That was a showstopper. That was the moment we all waited for. So to get, I'm a little bummed I didn't get to go on this one and see a Blue Angel up close, because man, growing up, that was just the coolest thing to see. We do fun stuff on site too. Career Day. Speaking of Blue Angels, here's a future pilot for us right here.
Yay.
And we got the fire truck to come out. I mean, I got a now a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, but they had a birthday party earlier this year. They had a fire truck come out. Oh my God, they lost their minds. That was the coolest thing ever. And we got one to come out and park right in front. We coned it off. I mean, this fire truck is 20 feet from our front doors right now. The elementary kids loved it. When they were done, we brought out the high school kids. They loved it. It doesn't matter how old you are. A fire truck is so friggin' cool.
Yeah.
And especially when they go to drive away and they finally hit the horn for you or hit the siren.
Except when you're having to sign the purchase order for $900,000 to buy one.
That can be very long-term future goals for Pivot. Middle school, high school field trips. We did the Independence Hall tour at Knott's Berry Farm. That was so cool. I have a season pass and I'd never been over there, and we got to do that this year. And they're all in character. They're given the tour. They're given the history of colonial times and the struggles that this country went through, and put it in context of some of the struggles we're still going through. And that was pretty awesome. And then we got to do a lot of fun, crazy rides after the educational part. So, balance of education and fun. We also went to the Riverside Art Museum, specifically the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Arts. I mean, that was mind-boggling. Like, you think of art until you're seeing it up close and personal. Maybe it sounds boring, and then you see it, and it's really thought-provoking. And I will say this to back up that statement: when it was time to leave each of these field trips, Knott's Berry Farm and the boring art museum, there were just as many kids that were bummed we couldn't stay longer at each field trip. Just as many kids wanted to stay and explore the museum as wanted to stay and do rides at Knott's Berry Farm. That was pretty cool. On-site activities. We celebrate every holiday. Every holiday is a party. Everything's an excuse to have a little fun and get off the computers. But when a kid that's 4.5 feet tall walks in wearing a 7-foot inflatable dinosaur, I mean, that steals the show right there. I could have put another 100 pictures of all the things we did, but I mean, this guy right here says it all.
Yeah.
And then our art club, it's our staple. Art club, I think, is the first club we ever had here. We have it every year. It's money, it's in the bag for us. And a big part of that is, when we sell the elementary program to parents, and I've heard Craig say it a million times, if your kid's homeschooled, but you don't want to get your kitchen messy, you don't want to, throw them paint in your living room, bring them here. They'll get messy here. And, we really sell that on the elementary program, but that feeling doesn't go away when they get older. And we have that art club where we still have the older kids have a chance to make that mess and still do those things that, isn't necessarily just for the younger kids. And we will never get rid of the art club. It's just too much fun for everyone. Graduation. Man, it felt chaotic leading up to it. I got to tell you, I was so stressed out all week and minutes before it started. And holy smokes, it might have been our best one ever. 100% our best one since we started having them in person again after COVID. We had our first ever Pivot Pride Awards celebrating students that really made an impact on our campus and with our student culture. We had our first ever student speaker. We've had students in the past, they get up in the rose ceremony and they kind of do an unplanned speech, but this is our first ever student that insisted and wrote and gave a speech at our graduation. That's a big turning point for us. That's a big moment for us.
Well, it was even bigger for her. So
Yeah, she's been with us for a long time.
7 years, 8, 7.
At least 7.
Yeah.
And big personality, but like a lot of kids that are looking for an alternative place to go. Socially awkward, which we embrace. That's what we're here for. And for her to get up and deliver that, and it was just amazing to see the growth. To see her, I think she started with us in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And so she was with us through COVID. It was crazy to come back from COVID and see her be a foot taller. It was pretty shocking.
Yeah, she did great. She's lovely.
Yeah. And school culture, and you may or may not recognize her in a couple of these pictures, but she was a big part of that. We're continuing to build. The first year back, it was pretty quiet. It was almost like we had a library here. We were trying to make some noise, and it's getting louder here every year, and in such an awesome way. We have welcome week barbecue, end of the year barbecue, everything in between, movie days, STEM days, slime days, making that mess, community service club. The picture here on the right is Wacky Hair Day for one of our spirit weeks. We're getting bigger and louder and more fun every year. We're rebuilding that culture. Here's another culture outside the learning lab. Park day, kickball, frisbee, splash pad, water balloon toss that may or may not have devolved into a water balloon fight. And then staff culture, Pivot. We're here we're school. We're here for students, but we're not just helping students. There's more than one teacher in this picture that came to Pivot with nearly all hope was lost for their existence in the world of education. They were coming from not great experiences, and I'm speaking personally. Before I got to Pivot, I was pretty much at the end. I was so disenfranchised with my previous experience, and other teachers at Pivot have told me similar stories where they didn't feel supported or they didn't feel like a part of the team. Pivot provides a great environment. I put this picture here of Jana and Tom not to kind of suck up to you guys, but to show that culture starts at the top. Like
It worked.
Always a good idea.
I'll take 2 birds with 1 stone. But I tell people, oh, you're going to work on Saturday. Yeah, I got to present to my board of directors, and from the outside looking in, that sounds so terrifying and intimidating. And I got to say, I love talking to you guys. I anytime I miss a chance to talk to you guys, I'm bummed out. I don't think I've ever once been intimidated to get in the mix with my board of directors and my executive director. And that's a level of comfort that really spreads across Pivot. Pivot is my family. We love coming here. It's a fun place to work, and from top to bottom, and Riverside is growing. We're hiring more people. We're enabling more people to expand their own personal lives, to move up in the world, to, pay their mortgage or take an extra vacation, do something to be a part of a culture and a positive work environment. And so building that student culture is huge, but our staff culture is a very big component that I'm very appreciative of having.
You got a great team there.
And I don't have a VN slide or a Q&A slide, but if anybody has any questions about anything, I welcome them.
I want to say that you could touch up my picture for me next time. But I want you to know, when I come to your site, it's inspirational. I mean, you feel like, we're doing a little bit to help you, and your great leadership. It's amazing to watch, actually. But to walk out of there, I get in the car, I'm going to drive off, going, I just felt a whole lot better about seeing what you guys are doing. It's just an amazing sight to see. And of course, graduation, like with that speech and everything else about the rose ceremony, it's just, we feel honored to be trying to help you do your job. It's just an amazing thing to watch. And thank you for God, all the stuff you do. It's just, and your 2 kids, which I know you're an iffy part of that part, but but anyway, thank you. Like I said, you just made my day every time I see something, or even and hearing from you as well. It's an amazing sight. So thank you.
Thank you. And we love having you every time you're here. It's always fun to get a visit.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon, very much.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. You know, what really struck me is how engaged the students are, not just on the academic side, but in the full range of activities that you're offering, with field trips and on-site activities and all that. And then that coupled with the culture that you're building with the students and the staff. And that's very impressive. And that comes from the leadership.
Right.
Developing a culture like you've described for us this morning really comes from the leadership. And so kudos to you for doing such a great job. And seeing the results is really very gratifying.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Go have a good Saturday. And thank you, Dr. Loomis. I appreciate you staying on and getting to see some of the stuff that we didn't show up in our board presentation with you all.
Okay, moving on. Financial update. Liz.
Unpinned Brandon here.
But I just to review that, those 2 graduations and hearing all that stuff, it is amazing sight to hear. I mean, like you said, you see, I always said you can make a difference in someone's life today. I mean, all of us, whatever it is. And to hear him talk like that, it's just, and we get to somehow help in some small way. It is amazing.
It is. It's
It
very
is.
cool. Very cool. You know, and Bill and I were laughing the other day when I was talking to Bill. Remember the first site was in the dog grooming
Oh, yeah.
parlor?
Yes,
And the photocopy machine was
Oh,
over
yeah.
the drain where they used to wash the dogs.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Because we
It's
weren't
co-
sure it was going to succeed, right? We
Yeah,
weren't sure. So we
right.
started really, really small.
Yeah.
And we outgrew that within 1 year.
Hi, Bill. Good to see you there. Yeah, you remember all of that.
Yes, that was a good time, a good start. Look where we are now.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I appreciate you saying that, and all the board members. That is our payday when we get to go to the sites and go to the graduations and really see the school for real. You know, we talk about it quarterly here at these meetings, but being there with the students and being there with the teachers is really special. So I always appreciate you board members when you do get to the sites and get out. We're always welcome. I know the teachers and staff love having lunch with us and talking with the students. It's really special. So thanks for making the visit, Tom, and just an encouragement to all of us to try and get out there when we can. And Jana, I know you have really worked hard this year. I want to say it publicly. We'll talk about it later, to get to the sites and be traveling again and being out there. And your presence as our leader makes such a huge difference. So thank you to you for making that extra effort this year. It shows.
Thank you.
Okay. If we're ready to talk money, well, I'll just
Ching, ching.
jump right into it.
Ching.
So
Do we have a lot of it?
a lot of it, and we're pretty good.
No,
We're in good
You're
shape.
supposed to say, we're getting there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You never say we have a lot
never
of it or
know what's
anything
on
like
the
that.
road.
You say we're financially healthy, but not wealthy.
There we go.
Yeah, there you
I like it.
Yeah, that's actually very true.
Excellent. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mhm.
Healthy but not wealthy. So we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year here. So at this meeting, we'll be, having one of our final updates about the 23-24 year. The next time you see those will be the unaudited actuals after we do the fiscal year close over the summer. We'll do an update on next year's budget, including what the May revise looked like and the little bit of the subsequent conversations that have happened with the legislature and the governor. And actually didn't see any emails come through about the final state budget, which was surprising, but I guess not that surprising. and talk about some of our assumptions for the budget next year, and make sure that any questions you have get answered before we move to budget approval at the next meeting in a few days. So starting off with a recap of our attendance. P2, if you recall, this is the name of the report where we submit our attendance to the state for the majority of the school year. And this report is what a lot of our funding is based off of, our enrollment and attendance, our average daily attendance for the start of the school year through about April 15th. And North Bay having a great year with a final P2 ADA of 359.31. And their average attendance 83.64, which is also a very solid year. So North Bay, our largest school, you can see, there have been some fluctuations throughout the year. The orange line tracker part is the attendance percentage. And you'll see this as we go through the slides. We kind of have a similar pattern that shows up where at the start of the school year, it's kind of everybody's really motivated and doing, getting very high attendance. And sometimes we see a little bit of a slump, and it usually picks up again in the second semester. But North Bay, very solid for the whole period there. North Valley, you can see similar kind of trends in the attendance line, but their enrollment was consistently growing all year, which is great. We often see a little bit of a dip in enrollment at the very end, like in months 7 and 8, after we stop enrolling students for the year. But we actually had some growth there in the final months. San Diego has the highest attendance rate. This has been a pattern for many years now, so 92.86%. So we're always working to get all the other sites, to see if we can get over 90%. And I will point out, actually, North Valley got very close, so they're 88.66%, and that I think is the highest P2 attendance percentage that I've ever seen at North Valley. So they really rocked it this year with attendance. So San Diego, awesome attendance rate and enrollment steadily increasing throughout the year, and we're hoping next year, you'll see in our assumptions, we're going to hopefully try to hold those nice high numbers of around 100 and get over 100 for San Diego's enrollment. Riverside, really consistent all year as far as enrollment and ADA goes. Some similar, dips in the attendance rate throughout the year, but had a really big surge in those last few months of P2.
What happened? I mean, I guess May or whatever that was the one from the right over. All the rest of them are going down. That one just struck up like a son of a gun.
Yeah, I don't know what caused that, but they had really great attendance that month. So that was kind of
like maybe they had big events every day. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. It's mid-February to mid-March is month 7.
Yeah.
So
Beginning the second semester, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Month 6 is.
God, if we could figure the formula out, we would have a
I
golden
know.
goose egg, right?
Yeah,
Like
so
enrollment.
if Brandon's
and
still on, I don't know if he has any
Are you
ideas
on?
of what made attendance so great in month 7. But yeah, it's great to see.
I got March. I guess it's March, somewhere in March. Yeah.
Yeah, about late February.
It goes around your visit, Tom.
There you go.
If I go there, your attendance goes up or down, maybe.
Oh, yeah, definitely peaked.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, Craig just said report cards probably landed
Oh,
from first semester, because our first semester doesn't
yeah.
end until mid-January. So yeah, that's a good point, Craig.
Okay, so then how does this all impact our forecast for the year? You'll see this nice big green chunk on the left, ADA-based revenue, and that is because we were being cautiously optimistic about our attendance rates. We normally see a bit of a fall off, and we actually saw really strong and consistent attendance throughout the second semester. So we now have those numbers that show what our P2 ADA was, and that allowed us to have solid data to actually increase the forecast to those numbers. And it was a great positive impact that the attendance rates and enrollment had for this year. It's been a really great year for attendance and enrollment. The other changes, pretty minor. We did have a significant need for computers this year as well, partially due to the strong enrollment continuing for a long period of time. Lots of students means they need lots of computers. And then we're, kind of doing a lot of professional development, especially with the educator effectiveness grant that we have. So we've been sending more people to conferences, things like that as well. So overall, current version of the forecast has a very healthy looking positive operating income.
Yeah, that's a great chart, Liz. And I think that's just a real testament to the staff. Thank you for your diligence in attendance and students. And that's a good use of funds for computers growing, upgrading, and investing in the staff and the conference travel and the professional development. I appreciate that.
And this is how it breaks down by site. Since the last time we presented in April, you'll see it has a net positive impact to every site. Every site is projecting a positive operating income, including San Diego, that had been slightly, ever so slightly negative at the last forecast update, is now 35K positive. Okay, any questions about the current fiscal year before we move on to next year? Questions? Okay, so budget for next year. First, just highlighting some things from the May revise. The LCFF increase for school funding came in at 1.07%, which is thankfully more than the January budget, which had been 0.76%. But it's still, 1% is not a lot. So we're, as all schools, looking at what can we do with 1%, and being cautious with our budgeting, but also trying to meet all of the needs of the students and staff, everything like that. That increase does apply to several funding sources, including for special education, mandate block grant, lots of things like that. And it's approximately $50 per ADA.
I've seen that before. That, when you look at it, it looks like a minus. I've seen that in other,
Oh,
somewhere else,
I
I get that. But if you look at it, especially in very small print on a computer, it looks like we went down $50. And they use that designation on a few other things, and I'm going, why is it negative? Now, I'm going to ask Liz, why are we have negative? Then I figured out maybe, so as a suggestion to those guys that do this, that they may want to not, well, why use it to begin with? Just say $50, 80.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to pass along the presentation. It looks negative.
Sure.
What do they call that? A tilde?
Tilde, yeah.
Well, they should,
Tilde Tom.
they should tilde it out.
Tilde.
Kill the till.
And the last line on here, the May revise included no deferrals, but I put a little asterisk on there because there was a lot of talk about potential deferrals.
I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Sorry.
It just woke up.
There was a lot of talk about deferrals that may actually happen. They're mainly just the very short June to July deferrals because it helps the state with their budget. It doesn't really have an impact to schools very much in terms of cash flow because it's in the summertime. So the latest news is that there will likely be some June to July deferrals, but nothing major at this point. Not like anything they had proposed at the beginning of COVID, where it was pretty crazy. So just a note on kind of what the LCFF increase has been for the last several years through COVID, and then what is projected that for the future. We have had this kind of, period of high increases for LCFF over the last few years, and that is kind of coming to an abrupt halt for next year, going from 5%, 13%, 8%, and now down to 1%. It is projected to go back up around 3 and hover there, but as you all know, anything can happen. So this is the data we're working with, the projections that we're using based on, advice from the Legislative Analyst's Office and all of our partner organizations. But it does, kind of create, a bit of an abrupt decrease. So budgeting has been a little bit interesting this year. A few other things just kind of in the context of the budget and, factors that affect schools as well as the overall state budget. is declining enrollment. And some of this data comes from the state, and I believe it's the Department of Finance. Have to look up the source if you're interested, but a lot of the schools have used one-time funds that cover multiple years, as many schools have gotten significant amounts of like ESSER funds and things like that. And it's kind of helped float a lot of districts and charter schools through these enrollment shortfalls and the declining enrollment that's been happening across the state.
Could you explain what the numbers on the left, what are those?
Numbers of students.
I
And
know
so
that
this
part,
is-
but what? I mean, it says thousands, I think, is that the word?
Yes, it says
That's a
thousands.
million, right? So it'd be,
So
it'd be
it's a
It can't be
million, yes.
thousands.
So
Well, no, it's 6.4
it's thousands.
million.
So it's like it starts around 6,000, so that's 6 million. So 6
Why don't
million
they
students.
say
Yeah.
millions? So the overall, all right, so the overall, those are millions or whatever.
Yeah.
Million, which means in fact the state's saving some money.
E-
The income is not based on enrollment.
Right,
The
this
state
is for the
income is
state
not.
budget for their expense that they have to fund a certain number
I'm
of
just saying, but
students.
they save money when this happens, this enrollment drop.
Theoretically.
Not theoretically, that's an expense
Well,
they have.
they also do things like add a new whole grade level for transitional kindergarten.
I'm not
and
saying,
advance
but they have,
enrollment,
this
things like that.
is,
But,
right,
yes.
they
and-
save money,
Yes, so they
say
save
we, whatever.
save some money if they have fewer students. But then that also means, districts get less money, charter schools get less money if they have fewer students. So the recent, kind of funding landscape with all of these large dollar amounts for things like ESSER and other one-time funds that can be used, over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, have made this situation where we have declining enrollment. And then all of these multi-year funding sources that are one-time funds are kind of, tapering off as well. So a lot of districts and charter schools are in a little bit of a tight spot.
that's a telling graphic. So enrollment's at a 25-year low, basically. And is that all public schools? And that's what the PADS numbers, that includes charter schools?
I believe so, yes. I don't know if it includes private schools. I would have to look at the source.
It probably wouldn't because they don't have the student number, right? They don't have the same. This is probably coming off the student
Right.
number.
Right,
Wow, it's
Yeah.
25-year low. Crazy.
And then if you look at it by county, these are some of the, kind of significant counties. The ones in dark blue are places, the whole state, and then counties where Pivot has our schools. So in San Diego and Sonoma, of our 4 Pivot locations, those are the 2 counties that are seeing the most dramatic declines in enrollment. It's not the worst. LA, it seems to be the worst. And Santa Clara and Alameda, Bay Area counties, tend to be struggling and having decreases in enrollment. For some reason, San Joaquin County actually went up. Maybe it's, people are finding less expensive housing there.
Yeah, it's
maybe?
housing affordability. That's what
Yeah.
the large part of this.
Yeah. But in our locations, it's a fairly representative average of the state as a whole when you combine the 4 counties where we have our Pivot locations. But San Diego and Sonoma County is doing a little bit worse off than the state average in declining enrollment, and Riverside and Butte doing a little bit.
so this is for this year, it says 234, I guess that's the estimate.
Yeah, so this is the expectation
But
for,
this is is this a 10-year projection?
yes, by 2030.
It's following the trend, though.
I'm just saying, no, this is
Yes.
not like this year
Right,
compared to
this
2
is
years ago.
not-
This is a projection they have, which is crazy. We can do that. That's nuts, frankly. But, okay, so this is a 10-year projection. It's not an actual one
Correct,
of the current year or whatever it is.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But the prior slide was more,
Yes,
Up to
this one
date.
is actual.
Yeah.
And it
Yes.
doesn't
But I
go
mean, you can see what
beyond.
happens even in the period of.
Sure.
But yeah, they essentially take this data and,
Just
you know,
keep
Right.
going,
project it out.
extrapolate.
What do they think
Yeah.
is going to happen for the next 10 years?
Although I think,
And
I
then
always
also
thought
break it up.
COVID caused a lot of these parents, they get out of a habit of doing it a certain way. Now they're finding other alternatives or homeschooling or whatever the heck it is. So that kind of threw everything up in the middle of nowhere. And then
yeah, but
It
you
would-
could, yeah.
I
You're right,
guess
it
it was
just-
starting to flatten out after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely might.
Okay, so the next one is a 10-year projection.
Yeah, so this is, and by county, so
Got
it's,
Oh, good.
Yeah, it has not happened yet, but the way things are going, this is the
Well,
projection at this point.
they're crazy.
So Liz, if you look at this enrollment declining, does that also mean the populations are declining?
I
Or
do
it's
not
not
have
inclined.
information on that.
No,
That's a
10-year
curiosity.
projection is crazy. That's,
Well, they got a plan.
well, good for them.
Okay, so how about pivot? These are our one-time funds, and so as we talked about here, that there are a little subtitle that many schools have all these one-time funds that have kind of, been floating things. Thankfully, Pivot is not experiencing a significant enrollment decline like many charter schools and districts are. So thankfully, so we have not had to, we don't feel like our one-time funds have been making up for a lack in that area in enrollment. However, we still are having to, navigate this sort of tapering off of one-time funds. I feel like that's the catchphrase that you've heard me say every single board meeting for the last 3 years is with talking about the plan for tapering off of the one-time funds. And we're getting there. So now next year, 24-25, get the list gets a little shorter. 25-26, it gets even a little shorter. And then everything that we currently have from these one-time funding sources is expected to be done by the end of the 25-26 year.
What's the last one, the Ahmed Big, whatever?
Oh, yes, sorry, there are lots of acronyms.
Oh, what is that?
The one on the bottom is Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Block Grant.
Prop 28.
No.
Oh,
Different.
that's right. Sorry.
This is the one from
The old one.
2
Yeah,
years
the old one.
before
Yeah.
Prop 28. Yeah, Prop 28 is not on here
Not
because
on.
it's not one-time funds. It's an ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a one-time funds, Arts, Music, Instructional Materials Block Grant. That's the name, but its actual allowable uses are much broader than that.
Yeah,
So.
who defines what those mean?
There is if you look on the CDE, the California Department of Education page for this grant, they have the list of allowable uses. And so we always look at that for all the grants. And I think part of that is because they knew it came out right before Prop 28, and then Prop 28 was approved by the voters. And they said, oh, now we have these two different fundings for art grants, maybe let's make this one a little more flexible. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but it does make it a bit easier for LEAs to navigate. So that one, we have some funds being spent out in that last year of 25-26, but after that, all of our one-time funding sources will be used.
What change, what are the projected changes for 26, 27? You can lose $200,000. But what are we doing that will probably have to go away or be reduced, or is it a big deal at all?
At
It's
this
not.
point, there's a lot of balls in the air and a lot of
Yeah.
factors that I
Got it. Go on. You can
don't
move
know
on.
if we will need to
Okay, got it.
to make any dramatic changes.
Yes, ma'am.
We've had a couple staffing changes.
Okay, so key assumptions for the budget for next year. We had already discussed in April, increasing the number of enrolled students a bit in the budget. And that's due to actuals from this year. We have seen the need, we've seen the demand of the North Bay wait list in particular again. And as long as we can have the teachers to staff for all the students, we will be able to enroll a little bit more in about 41 more students, which equates to about 25 ADA. That actually doesn't sound right.
Why not?
It's too low.
Because normally we have our attendance rate is
If you're like at 80
between 80 to 90.
80%, we were thinking in the
Yeah.
30s.
So apologies on that. I'm not sure what happened there.
You were just checking to see if we're paying attention.
Let's see, we already talked a lot about the revenues, the increase to LCFF, ESSER, the funding period for ESSER is almost up. So next year is the last year that we'll be able to have those funds spent. And the encumberment deadline, I
What
believe,
is
is
ESSER?
September 30th.
ESSER is what?
That's the federal COVID monies.
Got it. Okay.
As far as expense, we do have some increase to staffing related to hiring, make sure we have teachers to serve the additional students, and some other increase to programs like arts programs and other needs such as the community liaison that was a new position that you all had discussed as part of the executive director report last time. Computer expense has been pretty high. this past year, and we are planning on tapering it down a little bit because we've just had like a massive replace cycle of a lot of our things. So we're hoping to get it on a little bit more of an even keel, instead of having to replace so many devices all at once, have it on a replacement plan where we're replacing about 25% of our devices every year, so that every 4 years we'll have complete replacement. For our Chromebooks for student devices, which tend to last about 3 to 4 years. The depreciation expense, I wanted to highlight this for Riverside. As you recall, we had our large capital project to build out the facility. We moved into the new facility and it's awesome. We love it. And the expense for that is almost done. So next year is the final year of large depreciation expense that's tops 100,000. And after that, the depreciation expense will be done unless we have any other significant upgrades or things like that.
It's only 60 grand. I
Schedule.
saw the bids.
Okay, so here it is by site for next year. We do have all sites positive. Things are looking good. And pivot wide as well. And then as we look to the out years, I know Dr. Halverson, you asked about the 26-27 year. So you can see at this point, with all of the one-time funds slowly going away, the 26-27 year is currently projected to be just about a break-even year. We'll see what happens with the economy, the state budget, the different funding sources, and declining enrollment, things like that across the state may impact the level of funding that we get per student. So we're not sure. Obviously, it's always hard to project 3 years out, but this is our current forecast. It goes that far.
For schools, you have a limit on what they can have in their fund balance or reserves or whatever you want to call it. Do we have such things? Given this number, the answer must be no.
I don't know of anything that is explicit. I do know that some authorizers or counties have things that they negotiate in their MOUs with charters sometimes. Like I believe LA County has some more requirements around that other counties might not have.
Some might have it where it can't go below a certain number
Yeah.
because they could go under.
Correct. And
This
there's
clearly is the
best
other
practice.
direction.
Yes.
So, I mean, I like it, but I mean, it's from the.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, there's no limit as long as you're on the upside, not the downside.
Right. We do operate independent study programs. So as we talked about previously, we do have to submit funding determinations, and they are revising that whole process, which I believe we talked a little bit about in April. And so we don't know whether that will be an element in the review in the future. The state is in their annual information surveys that they send out in May to all charter schools. There were more questions this year, including things about, governing board members. Are you operated by a for-profit corporation or a nonprofit corporation? Lots of questions. And they even said explicitly that answers to these questions will be used to, help determine state policy on some of these things. So I have a feeling some of those questions are designed at this, close look at funding determination processes. And so there may be something, instead of the current percentages and the way they look at it as a 1 year snapshot, of you have to spend, 80% of your revenues on instructional expense. They might do something that's longer term. They may also look at things like ending fund balances and reserves. I don't know. But at this point, currently, there's nothing I know of that is a requirement or a limit.
So from a political standpoint, is there anything that brightens the future for charters?
Oh,
Yes, a little bit. And I went over the last board meeting. I went over that review that Liz was just referencing, the FCMAT review, as well as there was another organization that reviewed non-classroom based charter schools in the legislation. So I kind of highlighted what their findings were. And if you remember, I said everybody was like waiting for this huge blow, and it didn't happen. I mean, they did a really balanced analysis and they came up with some decent recommendations, that are neither bad nor good. They're just best practices, which is not usually what happens when they're, coming after non-classroom based charters. So in that sense, OJ, there's good news that there's no awful news, to put it that way. But there's nothing bright and shiny, the fact that there are no deferrals, at least not yet, that's good news financially. The fact that there's no major pieces of legislation hammering after charter schools in general or non-classroom based charter schools this year, that's a good thing. So there's no bad news. That's the good news.
And a lot of times, there are situations where there are reasons where people need to save up money, such as for facilities projects, because it's difficult to get financing sometimes as a charter school, especially a small charter school. So that's something that I know we've considered here in North Bay, is having a facility that we own instead of lease or rent. So, some of that ending fund balance can definitely be used toward capital projects that will kind of help improve our situation with facilities.
Well, they talk about, we had something like that, but it wouldn't last, or it's going to end up when you start buying, like, you still like store computers or stuff like that you could keep for a while.
Yeah.
And you had a good year, next year wouldn't be as good, so we're going to buy a lot of this stuff that can hold us over for a few years, like buying trucks or buses or whatever stuff. And it was a one-time shot, and you're done for 4 or 5 years. So when you get the bucks, you spend it, things like that.
Liz, I do have a question that you and I haven't had a chance to talk about. Way back when they were talking about the feds increasing special education-based funding, it still is apparently slated. I pulled up the budget, the federal budget, for an increase of $200 million. Is anybody talking about how that's going to trickle down to the states, if at all? It was like this buzzy thing back in the winter.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I did get there. Sometimes the CELPA sends out updates about
I haven't
that
seen
are
anything.
happening at that level. But I don't recall seeing anything final.
And James went in my stead for the CEO Council because it was right after the San Diego Spring Fling, and I went to Washington, so I can circle back with him and look at the notes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, obviously every bit helps, but unfortunately the special education money we receive from the feds is not
Minimum.
very much.
Yeah, it's like $500,
Yeah.
600 now, but they're talking about bringing it up to more like 900. So, on a, multi-million-dollar expense. Okay, enough, sorry. Every little bit helps though, so I'd be grateful. Do you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. So just some highlight of accomplishments. We did go through that funding determination process for Pivot Riverside earlier this calendar year, just a few months ago. It takes a while to get through all the committees, the ACCS reviews and then recommends to the State Board of Education, and then they, go through their whole process. But Riverside did receive a 4-year funding determination, fully funded at 100%, so that's great. Our final P2 ADA was almost 10 over our prior forecast, which is what causes that big increase to revenues, so that's nice. We do have some more funding determinations coming up next year for North Valley and San Diego. So we're obviously, we always want to make sure that we're preparing in advance, spending appropriately so that we'll meet those targets that are required. And then we also have San Diego renewal coming up. Well, there will be a renewal budget that goes with that renewal petition. So that'll be kind of finalized over the summer. And then, as I mentioned, we're closing the fiscal year very soon, and we'll bring you the unaudited actuals when those are ready. And, as we look forward, state economic outlook, it's, I don't know, I think it's anybody's guess at this point.
I mean, that's the only bad news, OJ, back to your question, is the increase is only like 0.67 in funding over next year. And certainly we have expenses that are going to be way over 0.67%.
It's 1.07.
1.07.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
they raised
it was
it in
0.76
May.
in the
Yeah,
January
0.76,
budget.
yeah,
So at least it's
May.
up from that.
Yeah,
But,
but
you
still, that's like piddly.
Yeah.
So,
So
The state's finances are not
Yeah.
doing well
Right.
at
Yeah.
all, so that's going to have
yeah.
an even bigger impact
Exactly.
as we go along.
Yes. And then, as I mentioned, just, North Bay facility, because we have some funds, some reserves that we can potentially use toward North Bay facility project, whatever that may look like. We may or may not be bringing some options to you depending on what we can find. because as you know, real estate and, facilities, things can be difficult everywhere.
So on this site, there are projected, you have some thoughts that something may happen.
This site hasn't had an upgrade in a long time. So we might need to spend some money if we stay here in this facility, upgrading things, redoing things. The HVAC system, for example, seems to constantly have, things come up.
And of course, it was during the hottest weekend, the hottest week during graduation, when it went down last week.
Bless this thing.
We
I mean, sometimes it's like at home, they got to fix things you can't see.
Yeah.
It's behind the walls.
Yeah.
We all know that, it's like fixing a car, whatever. And in any case, just do it. We have, we're sitting at 40%. There's money sitting there.
And we
Well-
have, and that's kind of the part of the frustration with, I use HVAC as an example. We spent maybe $50 or $55,000 last year to redo the HVAC, fix some things, and then it didn't seem to have worked in a sustainable way. So, we might need to look at different contractors to do it, different vendors, things like that. So we'll see. We're kind of evaluating, what needs to be done. And then, as you know, there's just many factors about whether this facility is where we want to be long term. It may be, it may not be. So
Right. I think that was going to be my comment, as I think we need to have some strategic discussions with board members about that before we sink more than 5 figures into that facility. I think there's also discussions that the facilities committee should have regarding that lease and the tenure and improvements to the site, what that means for the lease. There's a lot there. So there's 2 big discussions as far as where we locate and what we put into that building versus what the lease says.
When does the lease run out?
we just renewed
just
last
signed it, yeah.
year, I believe.
For how long?
For 5 years.
5 years.
All right. I believe
That's it.
Yep, that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Any questions?
I think it's amazing we're a $12 million operation now.
Yeah.
That's a big number. A little engine that could. Wow. Good work.
Liz, you're way too smart. I'm getting tired of
I kind of like it.
it.
Just
Okay,
saying.
me too.
Just saying.
All right, okay.
Great job. Thank you, Liz.